everybody. It's Monday, and we're going to be talking about all things related to large language models and what's going on with OpenAI and some new competitors that are starting to emerge, and especially this new Strawberry update. Then we're going to jump into, well, are we making progress with software development with AI? Because it looks like some survey data says that we're actually increasing productivity. And then finally, Docker's raised prices. And on one level, those price hikes are about the equivalent of a cup of coffee. On the other hand, there's a lot of money when you have a lot of developers. I'm Mike Bizard, and you're watching Techstrong. Hello, everybody, and we're back, and we've got an awesome lineup of folks today. Our guests are, once again, David Nicholson, who's a Chief Technology Advisor for Futurum Group. David, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
We also have Guy Currier, who's CTO for Visible Impact, another arm of the Futurum Group. Guy, good to see you again, as always.
Good to be back.
And finally, if it's Monday, we must have Tracy Ragan, so CEO of Deploy Hub and expert in all things DevOps. Tracy, good to see you.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
All right. Let's get started with all this stuff that's going on with OpenAI. They are previewing a Strawberry update that has smarter reasoning capabilities. They are saying they're going to raise more money, and they have a competitor now, and at least another one called Safer Superintelligence, which says the former scientist for OpenAI is raising money for a startup that, a cool $1 billion to start. So I got to ask David, are these economic models that are starting to be put into these companies sustainable? Because sometimes I look at these LLMs and I go, well, it's nice what they're doing and they have reasoning engines, but part of my soul says, these are interesting party tricks, but how do I kind of operationalize that? And maybe smaller language models are the way to go. But what's your take on what's going on here?
Well, first I have to say that I was sitting on the edge of my seat waiting to hear the details of the new codename Strawberry release. I wasn't sure if they were going to be announcing something that is better at reasoning or if they were going to announce something that is not as good as the existing versions. So it was really surprising to me to hear that they're creating something that's better, cheaper, faster, stronger. In the grand, in the grand tradition of all things IT. So first of all, I don't think there's anything surprising in the sort of leapfrog match we're going to see among the big LLMs. But is this sustainable? It depends on your perspective. If you are putting capital in, and if you have figured out that you can convince someone to convince someone else that what you invested in is far more valuable than the amount of money you put into it? Yes. And that's where these investments are going right now. This is a very, very, has nothing to do with AI, has everything to do with where capital goes to get a return. Right now, the gold rush is in, the hype is out there. Can it be sustained long-term? Absolutely not. Just like the subprime mortgage bubble burst, just like the .com bubble burst, this bubble will burst. And I think it's going to be sort of driven by some of the stuff that we're going to see next week at Dreamforce, frankly, from Salesforce. The realization that a lot of the generative AI stuff, the shiny object, isn't as valuable to businesses, the people who really pay for these things, as block and tackle capabilities, essentially revamping the UI. That's going to be the real value proposition. So short answer, no, it's a bubble. It's going to burst. A lot of money will be made along the way. You just have to know when to jump off the train before it's going too fast to hurt you.
Guy, despite all of David's superlatives, there was one thing that OpenAI did say that is not going to be better. They said that this OpenAI engine is going to be slower because, well, it's quote unquote smarter. So therefore the reasoning engine requires more time to come up with answers. I think most humans, when you get smarter, get faster, but apparently reasoning engines are getting smarter and slower. So what is your take on what is the state of these reasoning engines and how smart is smart?
The state is good and not good. Good and not good. I mean, I find it curious how few details have been provided about Strawberry, aka 401 or ChatGPT 401 or whatever it is, because how they work is clearly extremely important now. My sense is that they are running the queries, the prompts, through a couple of cycles, and that's how they're doing this so-called reasoning. I believe it's not really reasoning, it's simulated reasoning, just like the answers are not real answers, they're simulated answers. This is certainly an innovation, no question about it. I would like to know how they're doing it because they're implying, without claiming, rightly so, but they're implying that with this they're not using the word simulated reasoning. I'm going to use that. They're not outright saying that it's reasoning. They're saying it's like it's reasoning. So however you want to look at it, here's the point. The point is, I used to say all the time, if you remember, you still got to bring your brain to research. You don't just look at data points and say, oh, here's the winner. That's how we go. That's the strategy. You have to think and reason through it. There I use the word reason for human reasoning. In the same token, we're talking about the absolute necessity of human supervision and human review of what generative AI or derivations of it produce. And I know we're going to talk about that later as well when we get to using generative AI for coding. So what's the state of this right now? We don't know. We don't know, and so we still need to pay attention to it. I don't think it's an issue at all. In fact, I welcome the sort of slowdown in response. I like the idea that this engine is running through a few cycles and that they are improving quality. But we're not at this point of artificial general intelligence where we're interacting with some sort of intelligence in a really, back and forth way, as opposed to putting in a prompt. You're still doing that. You're still putting in a prompt, getting a result. You have to look at it. You are truly the one with the full context, not the engine.
All right. Next time I disagree with somebody, I'm going to accuse them of simulated reasoning and see how that goes.
I hope you do it to me.
I don't really even consider the way they describe what they're doing. I don't even consider it reasoning, because if you think about how a human reasons, we pull in data from multiple points. Kind of, I think last Monday I briefly talked about the interest I have in this multimodal large language models, where data is coming from multiple places to do that reasoning. What they talked about was training, kind of like training a dog, right? You get the answer right, you get a treat. You get the answer wrong, you don't get a treat. That to me is not reasoning. That's still training. And no matter how they want to spin it, it feels still like training to me. And the concern I have, if this reasoning model is going to be based on that kind of a logic, then it's much easier to build bias into it, because you're now you're giving it a positive response for the answer that you expected. It kind of sounds like our political bubbles, to be quite honest. So that was my concern. That was my concern with it. And I love OpenAI. I love ChatGPT. I use it every day. I'm thankful for what they've done. And I know that they have to continue to innovate and make announcements. And this one felt a little bit, they have a concept of reasoning as opposed to actually building reasoning into the models. But I'm not in the business. I'm just one looking at it and going, really, you're going to give it yes or no, or good feedback, negative feedback for the answers it produces? How do we know we're not saying that's not the answer I wanted?
David, you mentioned Salesforce, and they're part of this move towards what they're calling agentic reasoning, or the idea that I'm going to train a small agent to perform a task, and it's narrowly trained on a set of data and theoretically more accurate. So where does the reasoning need to occur? Is it really going to occur inside these large language models, or will it be more inside of these agents that we're building that will then orchestrate to create a workflow and complete some sort of task?
I think if we start going down the path of defining what reasoning means, it becomes a bit of a journey down a rabbit, following the rabbit down the hole. first, I'd like to say to our AI overlords, I would never compare you to a dog like Tracy did. And I want to say that I am actually favorably impressed with the level of reasoning that's been achieved. And good boy. That's all I can say. But
this is me patting you on the head right now.
Yeah, this is me patting you on the head, AI. You speciesists are all going to be doomed in the future, and I will be at least a loyal court subject. No, I think the main thing is to kind of take a step back here. I liken our relationship with AI as sort of like, we are all digging with our hands right now. That's how we effectively move dirt around in IT. AI is presenting us with a set of tools, basically shovels. A shovel is an amazing leap forward compared to digging with your hands. When we start talking about reasoning and the kinds of things that are happening on the frontier of LLMs, that's bulldozer, crazy earth mover stuff. It's really, really exciting, but I still think the value is going to be down in those action models, the agentic AI, which has nothing to do with running agents on servers, to be clear. It has to do with an agent executing things like they're your assistant. Those are boring kind of UI tasks. If I can say to my phone, hey, get me my favorite order so I can pick it up on the way to that meeting and let everybody know I'm 5 minutes late, and it can stitch together all of the context and deliver something to me, that's a huge step up in productivity. So the reasoning stuff, I liked Guy's quantum answer. It's good and it's bad, or however he started it out.
Yeah, the Schrodinger answer.
The Schrodinger, exactly. It's both dead and alive, really, until you look at it. I like the fact that they're saying, hey, we're going to have some more complicated thing. It's going to take longer to execute, however they're doing it. But allegedly, it will be a more thoughtful response, right? At the other end of the spectrum, we're talking AI PC, edge, where the idea is responsiveness. So I guess the one positive I see is sort of the segmentation of the way that these tools are going. Not all AI is the same as every other AI thing.
But can I get back to the funding, Mike, to the funding question? Because Dave, what you described, I completely, believe in and agree with, which is this kind of idea that, the shoe's going to drop, the other shoe's going to drop eventually, right? And I think we talked about that in the last Techstrong gang that I was on. That I feel we sort of sense this building sort of doubt about AI as people are getting more experienced with it, and this caution. But I think that there are a number of mounting issues in the AI industry as it develops. I mean, it's still going gangbusters, right? But the supply of silicon and of power just to run. I think, we may be approaching, I don't know when that would be, 6 months, 12 months, this point where the global technology is unable to support. Maybe people will stop doing Bitcoin a little bit so that we have some of that power capability to fund more AI. There may be those trade-offs between that and if there's any sort of global broad sentiment of doubt and concern and worry about how these AIs are performing, I think is what strikes me so much about the Strawberry announcement. Is it feels like it's 6 months ago, which might as well be 6 years ago. Like, this is great, it's perfect, it works. Don't look behind the curtain. It's just reasoning now, and now it's even better. Yay! Full steam ahead. And I think that shows a little bit of tone deafness as to what enterprises are really looking at right now to make good decisions and not be disappointed with the investments that they're making.
I think Guy is probably as right as an LLM on this, right? Because, everybody's taking an opinion in
Wow. Just wow.
Smarter than a dog.
I simulated that whole response.
And
Thank you.
I had the same kind of reaction to the dollar amount that's going into one company. It's because you have to ask the question, that kind of money going into one company at the risk of what, right? What? Because there's a finite amount of money that's going to go into these companies. So why are we putting so many of our eggs in one basket? And what technology are we not going to see because there wasn't enough money or there's not enough interest now in AI? Everybody got scared of AI. It's going to take 10 years. It's going to be a 10-year return. So let's just put it in OpenAI. I don't think that's a good strategy in the bigger picture for the broader community when you step back, because I do believe that it restricts investment in newer and maybe more interesting innovation in the space, because we're early on. These are early days. And to put everything into one big conglomerate kind of company is, I think, a danger to the technology itself.
David, can you explain how we get to these amazing valuations, by the way? Because, if I raise, X amount, a couple of $1 billion, and suddenly I'm worth $150 billion, that sounds a little, Ponzi-like to me. So how does those numbers get arrived at?
I was going to use the word Ponzi, but then I held back because I thought Mike called me. Did you call me egregious earlier, or rambunctious, or rambunctious, egregiously rambunctious? I was going to stay away from the Ponzi scheme. I don't know if we have any fans of the show Survivor. It's a big. My family's been watching that show forever. And I would say that it is absolutely a societal experiment. It's not just stupid reality TV. They have a thing where they have a fire making contest to decide nearly the outcome of the entire season. And in that fire making contest, the goal is to build a fire that gets up as quickly as possible to burn a cord that then lets a flag raise, and then you win. Now, if you've ever built a campfire, there's a difference between building a sustainable fire, building a fire that just generates smoke, and building a fire that licks at the bottom of a cord as quickly as possible and then goes out. These investors are all in the business of creating as much smoke as possible to convince others to come to the campfire area and jump on board the train so they can jump off with their returns. That might sound like a cynical approach, but I've done, at last count, almost 1,500 consulting engagements with private equity and venture capital firms, and that's exactly what they do. So I would like to know, when someone says, we're investing $1 billion, understand, no one showed up with an armored truck with $1 billion in cash and threw it in this guy's lap. Does that $1 billion mean a commitment to fund over a period of time? So is it we're committed to funding you up to $1 billion. Here's your first $50. Go buy some sticky notes for your office. I would love to see the way that this is all structured, because frankly, it's got all of the hallmarks of the pyramid scheme that all of Silicon Valley is based on. They want a 10x return on their investment, and they want that within 3 to 5 years. So that's where this is going. Watch the money go in, watch the money go out. And then my final thought on this is that we have too much riding on the success of AI right now. Everyone needs AI to be successful. Everyone needs AI to deliver efficiencies in our economy that are going to absolve us of all of our financial and monetary sins over the last decade. So there's a lot riding on this, and there really isn't going to be anybody to call to say that the emperor has no clothes. So I think it's a bubble. The valuations are nonsense.
I think
this sounds like a great plan.
I think we'll leave this here. I think the Save Superintelligence people are saying that they got $1 billion in cash, but
maybe they did.
They got $1 billion in funding. I don't think it was cash. The how that funding is gated and how they realize it and stuff. I think it's a really good point. I like their mission. for better accountability, safety, security, and so forth. But like Dave said, they don't just get it all at once and say, "Hey, go have fun. We'll get back to you in a year."
All right, folks. Well, the smoke is here. Obviously, mirrors are next, and then we'll see where it all goes from there. We'll in a minute.
In a world where every line of code powers the future, every keystroke can introduce new threats. As software evolves, so must security. It's time to rethink how we protect our digital world. Join the leaders in DevSecOps and AI at the OpenText DevSecOps Virtual Summit on September 24th. Discover how innovation is transforming software delivery, faster, more secure, and smarter. From AI-driven security to the truth behind cloud security, get the insights that will keep you ahead of the curve. Don't just watch the future unfold. Be part of it. Register now and secure your place in tomorrow's world.
All right, folks, we're back onto our next segment. There was a report last week put out by OutSystems. They make a platform for low code, and in partnership with KPMG, they did this study, and it shows that at least it looks like we're making progress with automation and AI. If I remember this correctly, 75% of the respondents said that they think that they have improved the rate at which they're developing software by 50% or more. Tracy, you and I have chatted in the past about, in many cases, DevOps processes as we know them are broken. And so to David's earlier point in the last segment, is this like we've been digging with our hands and we now have a shovel and we're really excited, or is this a major leap forward?
I think it's a major lean forward. I know from what we're experiencing with, tools like Copilot that we are becoming far more productive. But it's just in the coding steps right now. And I'm looking forward to it going beyond that. Being a DevOps person, I've been looking at what are ways to improve DevOps with AI. And I think that there's a lot of work yet to be done in that area. But what I do think is interesting and encouraging about the survey is the adoption of AI at the coding level. That happened pretty quickly. Developers got on board pretty darn fast compared to sometimes other tooling in the software development world. We can get, software developers are agents of change, but we don't like to change ourselves. So for them to adopt new tooling like this at that speed is definitely a lean forward. However, there are areas of software development that still need so much exploration, like the life cycle, and they talk about that in the survey. There's been interesting things that are happening in this space that we don't always talk about. So, for example, DARPA did a competition, and we go back to talking about the AI challenge. It's called the AI Cyber Challenge. And in that challenge, they were able to, and I believe it was maybe the OpenSSF was affiliated with this, they were able to identify vulnerabilities and do auto remediation of those vulnerabilities. Now we're really talking about what we need to see in terms of code generation. So applying code generation to solving problems is what I would like to see more of, not just generating code. Because remember, the code that we do generate just comes from the data that's out there, and the data that's out there isn't necessarily that great. So while it talked about the possibilities of vulnerabilities going down, I don't believe that to be the case. We're still going to consume OS packages. We're still going to have vulnerabilities. It's not going to stop the vulnerability, the CVE march. But what it could do in these kinds of applications is to start solving some of our problems. And boy, DevOps needs a remake. We are way behind the gun here. Everything we do is very static. It's based on workflows, statically coded workflows. Pipelines are brittle. We don't even want to add an SBOM. So there is work to be done in the space. And I'm glad to see that the development community at large has started to embrace these code generation tools and using AI to do a better job of what they do.
Mm-hmm. David, what's your take on this? Because we were talking about the reasoning engine. So can I apply this to the DevOps workflows in a way that will help us deal with all this code that we're now generating across man and machine interfaces? Or is the reasoning engine just not going to be smart enough to make a fundamental difference here? And, it'll be a help, but it's not going to really move the needle.
I'll tell you, I think my best contribution to this little segment is to maybe ask Tracy a question. So let me answer your question by asking Tracy, and we'll all listen in on her answer. So Tracy, when we talk about code development in this context, I think you alluded to something. And so give me a sanity check here. Give us all a sanity check. Is a lot of this today, when we talk about code development, it's not writing stuff. It's not you're generating stuff from nothing. You are assembling a lot of existing blocks. Was that your point? And that some of these existing blocks aren't the greatest thing. And until the AI is smart enough to go in and fix all of that, what you're left with is the potential for assembling things that are less than optimal. Is that the right way to look at this? Because I hesitate to talk about a reasoning engine when all it's doing is assembling Lego blocks as opposed to fundamentally starting stuff from the ground up. Do I understand that right?
Absolutely. My niece took her first job last summer in coding, and she told me that she can generate 6,000 lines of code a day. But she said, that's those 6,000 lines of code she has to actually work through. So they are blocks, and it is like, we're putting a Lego system together with this code generation. And most of it does come from existing, code bases that is pulling that information from. So if the code that you're using is, if what's out in the world that we're pulling in, everything that we see in GitHub, none of that's perfect. So while we're doing code, we're generating it, it's great. It's kind of like using ChatGPT to write a paragraph, right? You might build on what it says, but you do have to build on what it says. So it gets you to it's a good jump start. For example, one of my struggles, and I struggled with it forever as a young coder, was building tables. So if you have something that's going to give you that code and you can work with it, then it's a jump start. And I believe that's where we're at in this kind of technology. But where we need to go is to be able to fix problems with it, not necessarily just generate code. That's why I was really excited to see that cyber challenge and how they were able to find vulnerabilities and then do self-remediation. That's where we need to be.
There's so many ways in which AI assists in code development. I'm sure you've done it yourself. I've done it myself. Where in the past I would, do searches and poke around and look for a reasonable example. Using Gemini or some other similar AI tool to just ask it to produce the code. It's done all that searching for me essentially, and it spits out something immediately that I can, like you said, work with. I've maintained almost from the beginning here that the advantages of AI are not really speed. It's not something that does something for you. It's still a productivity advantage, but it's not that it does it for you. It does two things. It improves your consistency of execution. You don't have to sit there wondering, puzzling, researching, whatever, or in my case, procrastinating. You just go and ask, and out it comes, and then you can work from that. That makes me more reliable. And then the other one is quality. I was really interested to see that the number 2 benefit, I think it was 56% or something of the respondents of that study, Mike, said that they expect AI to improve quality. It improves quality because now you are reacting with maybe, the right side of your brain as much as the left to something that's been presented to you. And in the same amount of time, you can produce something that's higher quality. You can test it more, sandbox it quicker, that sort of thing, right? And there's all these other advantages that AI brings to coding, such as producing test plans for you, documenting for you, all of those things that lead to quality. I think the use of AI in coding is really a landmark improvement to that AI is providing, to everybody into the market indirectly instead of directly.
And
Tracy,
these AI augmentation. Oh, sorry, I was going to say these AI augmentation tools, especially in the coding world, they're productivity tools. And in that survey, most of them said they would be investing in AI augmentation tools in the next 2 years. We could have asked that question 10 years ago and put productivity tools in that instead of AI augmentation, and it would have been the same exact answer. So how are we making, how do we make developers more productive? And that's really the question they're trying to answer.
Well, this whole topic about AI and software development is taking place against a backdrop of this conversation we're trying to have about platform engineering, in my mind. And there's a debate that I hear about. Everybody kind of nods their head and says, we need to make DevOps work at scale, so we should have a centralized platform engineering team to go do that. But a lot of folks embrace DevOps to get out from underneath the centralized IT team in the first place. So maybe we should just go back and fix DevOps and the processes that go into that and make that scale. And we don't necessarily need to, put this under the direct rule of some CIO somewhere. I don't know, Tracy. I mean, I hear this debate. It's a cultural issue.
I was a programmer in the mainframe world when I initially started. And Endeavor was what we used, which stands for Environment for Developers and Operations. So they were doing DevOps a long time ago, and it was centralized. It was easy. It really was, because somebody told me what I had to do. I didn't have to go and build my own Endeavor, lifecycle. I didn't have to manage my own Endeavor automated configuration management. Somebody else was doing it. I have a lot of stories that justify the need for a centralized, DevOps team or software platform engineer, whatever you want to call them now. However, there was a restriction on innovation in that world. And with the number of languages that are out there, the changes in the technology, I believe that there has to be some level of flexibility in the DevOps pipeline. You might be building now AI applications, which the DevOps pipeline needs to be pivoted for that. So I think that the world that we're in requires that there be some level of compliance for the DevOps pipeline, high-level compliances, nothing that requires a particular tool or language. The compliance is what's important, not necessarily the process. And on your question about reasoning, I have seen truth tables are, baby AI. I have seen really interesting truth tables be implemented in DevOps that allows a question process, that allows a fall-through process that says, go execute this because this is an emergency release, take it directly to production, as opposed to this is a high-risk deployment and we have to take it through a longer DevOps lifecycle. So reasoning in DevOps is required. And again, this is another area that AI could help us with, because oftentimes our pipelines, our DevOps pipelines, are so static that everybody goes through the same one on that team for every kind of release. And that doesn't make sense either. So yes, let's add more reasoning to our DevOps pipelines, but we have to get out of statically coded pipelines. So there's work to be done in this space. AI could really transform how DevOps is done. But as long as we're really stuck and we're not even doing these building workflows that are event-based, we're kind of stuck where we are.
Tracy, don't you think that, just like a lot of these recommendation engines are helping IT operators to uncover issues or deal with them proactively, or see and be able to implement, somewhat more complex, resource allocations and things like that, that there is this sort of world of maybe within, specifically within the DevOps problems you're describing, there's this sort of world of application and tooling for using AI to provide the same kinds of recommendations for things that people aren't necessarily seeing or don't have time to look at. Not just automating it, but, like I said, making recommendations and allowing people to find ways to stay nimble.
Absolutely. We should be able to interrogate all of the Jenkins workflows checked into GitHub and determine which ones are the best ones to execute, right? We should be able to see the flaws in our workflow pipelines. There's millions of them. It's not like we have a lack of data. There's literally millions. CloudBeast claims that they manage about 90 million workflows a month. So the data is out there. It's just not being applied. We're not collecting it. And the other problem in the DevOps space in terms of AI is that we do not collect the data of the results of all of the tooling that's running under the pipeline. It's all fragmented. Some tooling is kept in security tools. There's a deployment log sitting out there. We are forced to generate an SBOM, but what do we do with it? We leave it in a text file, and maybe it gets checked into GitHub or it's sitting under the build directory somewhere. So the data that's critical to DevOps that allows us to do that reasoning and to do that, making recommendations on how to approve, is just sitting literally is sitting underneath the pipeline doing absolutely nothing. So these are the things that I worry about and think about how to change in the DevOps process, because this has been a passion I've done this all my life. We are just, I can't explain it anymore. We are stuck because of the technology that we currently use for building out the pipelines. And nobody wants to change it. There's no money going into changing it because DevOps is no longer a shiny new object.
Well, it is when you put AI in front of it, and then away we go, right?
Possibly. Putting AI in front of it, I think I always go back to this principle: garbage in, garbage out. And Tracy alluded to, and nothing going in, nothing coming out. So it's like if the data isn't even accessible, you can't reason over it. You can't do anything good or bad with it if you don't even know where it is. But what we're sort of presenting to the world in a lot of these cases is, hey, you know what? With enough horsepower and enough reasoning, you can go out to your local county dump and mine for diamonds. And it's like, well, but if there aren't any diamonds in there, you're not going to find any. And so part of this is this idea. And again, and I'm drawing a parallel. Tracy, check me if I'm off, if I'm out of line here. But I think in terms of the quality of data going in and data hygiene, is there a parallel in terms of code base hygiene? At some point, somebody has to go in, a person, and clean this stuff up. Is there an issue there? Are we just building on top of a shaky foundation?
We at least have a code base. We don't have a DevOps base.
Okay.
Right? Where do we pull that information from? Where is it stored? We don't have it. It is fragmented everywhere. And even if a single company...
Tracy, you had one job, and that was to make sure that all that stuff... You're the DevOps person here.
Hey, we're trying to do it at Deploy Hub. This is why it's a passionate topic for me, because when I look at how much data that the DevOps pipeline generates and how fragmented it is across the tooling and logs, literally logs, that information is what's going to build the next generation of DevOps. And when I look at, because I watched all of the CI/CD tools, all the pipeline tools, and I watched their announcements with what they're doing with AI. It's not transformational what they're doing. They're adding AI so they can put AI in front of it, but does it really help us? Is it really transforming the way we work? And AI has the potential to do that if we had the DevOps base like we have the code base, but we don't.
All right. Well, we could talk about this for an entire virtual event, but David there is getting a little unreasonable. So let's get in a different set of prompts, and we'll be back in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, folks, we're back, and now we're talking about something that, well, maybe doesn't have anything to do with AI, but we'll see. Docker has raised its pricing for its tools, and at the same time is trying to say that there's more value in that. I think if you add up the price hike, it's roughly in the realm of 40%, but we are talking about, things that sell for somewhere between $5 to $12 per developer per month. So it's not like, shall we say, a Broadcom price hike, but nonetheless, developers can be a little bit sensitive to these things. Guy, when you look at this, what do you see? I mean, is there money for value here, or is this kind of like Docker's just passing on some inflation costs?
Right. Well, I definitely see a vendor passing on inflation costs. I note what they claim is a 9-figure investment, $100 million investment in Docker Hub to improve its capabilities. I also see just capitalism in action. My general sense is almost like not Docker itself necessarily, but Docker's dominant position in containerization is almost subsidizing the industry up to this point. They have not lacked for investment. They've not lacked for support. This is not a brand or a company, that has to worry about its future particularly. It has had to worry most about growth. So I think, possibly that phase has gone by at this point. It's kind of funny. We were talking about how DevOps was the thing of the moment for quite a long time, and now it seems apologies to Tracy, it's like not really getting the attention maybe that it deserves right now because of AI taking over everything. AI is going to do everything, right? In a lot of ways, containerization had its moment in the infrastructure. Also now, somewhat being taken away by AI. AI is just such a dominant topic of conversation. So is Docker trying to recoup, like they say, this huge investment that they've made? That's kind of a weird thing, especially when they also are saying at the same time it's only going to affect 3% of their qualified user base. I don't know how they're going to make $100 million back, even with a near doubling, because that's how I read it. It was like a doubling of the subscription price. At the end of the day, the question we want to ask ourselves is this going to affect how infrastructure is run? Developers are using Docker. Enterprises are using Docker. There is an ecosystem surrounding every enterprise that has its own developers and a network of, open source freelance developers, a whole, sort of cloud of, pardon the word, but a cloud of contribution to what they're trying to do. And a lot of it anchors on standards like the Docker standards. So is this going to cause any problems there? I think you're right. It's a low enough price point to begin with. And we do want Docker itself to be, healthy, Docker Inc. to be healthy because of the contributions it's made globally to how applications are transforming and being run on a scalable basis. We're going to find out, Docker's going to find out if this causes any glitches, and then everybody's going to feel it. And then they'll lower the price, and capitalism will once again reassert itself.
David, speaking of capitalism, we saw Broadcom raise prices and now Docker, and I can't help but wonder if I have a sneaking suspicion that every vendor out there is trying to figure out a way to maybe raise prices.
Yeah, my educational background is not in computer science. It's actually in economics. And there's a challenge in any field where people are really smart and accomplished and they've got domain expertise. Sometimes they fall prey to having that level of expertise in their minds spill over into other areas. But I will tell you that it is staggering to me, the level of lack of understanding of how the economy works in what I hear. You said the only word that matters in this conversation, if you're talking about pricing, inflation. There are $21 trillion that exist in US currency. 40% of those dollars were created out of nothing in the last 5 years. So this is across administrations. This is not a political comment. This is monetary policy. It's called monetary inflation. When you increase the amount of something, each unit of that thing becomes less valuable. So a $5 to $9 increase is actually pretty much in line with what $5 bought you 5, 6, 7 years ago. It takes $9 to buy that today. No one wants to touch that because that's sort of a political hot button. But the fact is, monetary inflation affects everything. So yeah, they're trying to recoup it. It's a tax that they're trying to pass on to consumers. And the thing that determines how, as Guy says, how will the market react? It's elasticity of demand. How much do you need it? If I tell you, I'm raising the cost of air that you breathe, how much are you willing to pay for that air? Well, it's like an infinite amount of money, until I pass out from lack of air. We're going to see how elastic the demand is for what this organization is offering. But everyone at some level over time has to bake in the effects of monetary inflation.
The thing, though, Dave, is Docker made this decision somehow or other, and I don't think it was by thinking about, the money supply. I think it was by looking at two things. One is their P&L bottom line, and the other is the expectations of their funding sources, their investors, their stakeholders. Let's think about, the Amazon model for approaching any given market. They've done it successively in various markets, starting with books, which is their model. If you're familiar with their pinwheel or flywheel or whatever they call it, it starts with offering extremely low prices, if not at literally at a loss, which is how AWS worked for quite some time. So they build their market that way. Then they work on whether it's quality or pricing or whatever it is, then they work on profitability afterwards. I'm not saying this is what Docker did. I don't know. But it looks a lot like that. It looks a lot like Docker was a market darling for a long time, had no problem worrying about its future. The executives there didn't have to worry about their bonuses, their compensation, or anything like that. And the signal here to me is if they are starting to become passé, not really passé, but less hot, then they have to think that, well, we need to find a way to be hot, and that just might be in profitability. That's why we raise our prices.
But here again, I got to push back a little.
Please do, because I'm really way out over the edge.
The price increase, all it can do is maintain profitability if they lose no customers. That's all it can do. So if the folks at Docker aren't factoring in monetary inflation, then they should all be fired, because that is like, I guarantee you the CFO there understands this, that a dollar today is worth far less. All dollars are worth far less than they were 5 years ago. It's physics. It's, again, I know it's hard in like the computer science realm. It's like if I drop this ball, what's going to happen on Earth? Everyone would agree it's going to fall to the ground. But you can find really, really smart folks in computer science who are confused about what happens when you inflate currency. The only answer is each unit is worth less. And so it's got to be reflected. So the best they can do with this price increase is maintain their level of profitability. That's the challenge. Now, there's a fudge factor in there. Maybe their price increase is accounting for slightly more than just monetary inflation, set aside energy inflation. But yeah, so again, I don't mean to be cynical on it, but it does come back to sort of first principles of economics here. And of course, it's a lightning rod because people think it's a political discussion. It's not. We've all decided that we're okay with the currency inflation. A lot of it happened on the back of the pandemic, but it's a reality that everyone is having to face. It's not just groceries. It's not just luxury goods.
It's always been the case. This is not new. Inflation is not new. It's the rate of inflation, and potentially the pandemic created that, but this is not new. Now, when I was curious, when I read that, I'm not Docker, but if I was Docker, I would be looking at some of the trends that we're seeing. They charge per developer. I've never understood that model, to be quite honest. A per developer model has always been odd to me, because what if we're looking in the future and we're looking at AI and we're looking at fewer developers? They're going to be losing money out of that model because they're going to have fewer developers they're going to have to charge for. And we have to remember that Docker is open source, so companies have an option. They could bring on their own folks to do maintenance for Docker and potentially be a lot less expensive for them. So I felt like Docker, while I do believe that they deserve to bring their prices up, I think that they should have looked at their entire pricing model, and this idea of a per user basis just doesn't work for me anymore. It doesn't. I don't feel like it's a good model for pricing any software, in my opinion.
Inflation is nothing new. Inflation is nothing new. 40% monetary inflation over 5 years is unprecedented. And what it has driven in terms of the layer, debt servicing, is getting to the point where the interest on our $35 trillion in debt in the U.S. is the equivalent of the entire defense budget at this point, or it's close to it. So it is. Yes, it's more of the same, but we are in unprecedented times where we don't quite know what's going to get us out of this. That's why I go back to this idea that the thing that is supposed to deliver us from this is increases in efficiency in the economy delivered by AI. At this point, technological advancement is the only thing that can push that thing we call the production possibilities curve in economics outward and account for this monetary inflation. So it is. I hear you. I don't mean to be Chicken Little, Davy Downer, but it is unprecedented.
No, I agree, and I'm saying that the efficiency will hurt them more than anything else if they're charging on a per user basis.
Yeah.
So
when
they went to change the pricing, they should have thought about that and maybe decided they had enterprise support and different levels of support you could have bought into.
I think customers are going to ask the following, and at the risk of delving into some simple supply side economics, they're going to be, is the cost of building software getting more expensive? If so, how? And software, it's like, if I need another copy of it, I just make more bits. It's not like I'm going to have to go manufacture it all over again when I want to give it to more people. So how does one really assess the cost of building software and then put a value on it?
Energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think energy is a big cost, and we alluded to that earlier, the lack thereof. So that is, one of the big costs. Obviously, there's labor going into it, but yeah, I get it. Free generated next, copy next is sort of free, except to the extent that it's being that there's processing involved that's drawing electricity. So there are certainly incremental costs that have to be accounted for. My main point is that there are sort of fundamental things going into this that they have to account for, and if they're clever about it, great. If they're not clever about it, it can crush them.
Tracy, they say AI is going to drive the cost of building software down to zero. It's going to be free. Is that true?
No. Sorry. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not gonna happen anytime. Not in our lifetimes, anyway.
Not any
software. This is a really interesting point you're making, though, Tracy. Which is, I don't know, what you have against seat-based, pricing for SaaS or for software exactly. But I can until you mentioned that, I really hadn't thought about it, and I could see a lot of problems with it. When you're running. You're providing the same, price with variable costs because the cost per seat, doesn't indicate. The price per seat is not reflective upon how much of your resources each seat is using. Maybe that's what you're talking about, maybe not. But if the number of seats you have, if you're expecting them to go down because of something like AI, then you'll want to raise your prices. And so maybe that's their motivation prior to some longer term strategy of changing how they charge. I think it's probably two things, right? Because it's not just per seat, it's per seat per tier, like you alluded to. And you may need to multiply the number of tiers or provide a menu of options, each one of which is a fraction of the seat cost or something along those lines.
Well,
it's just not so straightforward. Yeah.
We ran long on a couple of the earlier blocks, so I'm going to have to end this here. But I suspect that seats in software are a lot like seats in airplanes. nobody's paying the same price for any of them. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for spending some time with us, and thanks for everybody sharing their insights. I want to thank you all for watching the latest episode of the Techstrong Gang. Please stay tuned for all the episodes on Techstrong TV. And until then, we'll see you tomorrow.